Hello everybody, I am Jamin Siregar, and today's class we will continue our next chapter that will be taken philosophy, educational and the challenge of postmodernism. We have to know our learning objective before we start our class, so every students will able to achieve the good performance when at the final examination you are very good in your high score. The first one that the learning objective will find as that you are will be able to characterize the postmodernism variety. That's number one. Number two, you are able to analyze the postmodernism variety as well. The third one, you will be able to analyze what is the postmodernism regarding its philosophy. And the last, the fourth one, you will able to evaluate postmodernism, philosophy, and education. Now, since we know we are in the Seventh-day Adventist institution, we will try to find what is the correlation or the evaluation after we learn about the postmodernism, and it will be again related to our vision and mission. Now, if you are doing any of next any of our assignment, I will try to give some things that it will be helpful to you regarding with our institutions as Seventh-day Adventists. Now, it is always to know that in every things, if we learn something, forsake this one is new, we will be able to connect it to our vision and mission. Dear students, maybe some of you have experienced fails, right? As I am too. And how did we know? We realized that we were failed. And if we realize we know that we were failed, how we do to fix it? Maybe as a sample, when we are still in our childhood, we know when we start trying to our first step, try to learn about how to step it away. You know, our first step, maybe we will fail. We cannot stand still. But a long time during our exercise, now we can just not walking, but we can running. Now, that's one thing that I assume everybody will, at minimum, he realize the experience of fails they ever happen in their life. But what we have to do if we realize we are fails, and then how to fix it? These things, as our previous understanding about the postmodernism, you know, a word that has prefix post, it means that after. So postmodernism is just like what happened, what will be the next philosophy after modernism. Okay, I will continue. Okay, Now we will continue our first part to the second one. But before we do that, we continue our lesson about postmodernism. I'm asking someone to lead in our prayer. So let us bow down our head and we pray. Amen. Okay, student, back about the experience when we have failed. So what can we learn from the postmodernism relate to the our failure? Now, to find out, I would like first want to explain in the light of modernism. Modernism has a desire for progress and for humanizing humanity. This spirit is based on the very optimistic beliefs of the modernists about the power of human ratio. Okay, so the key words in modernism is the power of human ratio. Now, in this area of the ratio, is seen as the power possessed by humans who understand reality, build science and technology, morality, and the aesthetics. In short, the ratio is seen is the sole force that determines everything. The human ratio is assumed to be able to explore factual reality to find law or foundation that is essential and universal from reality. In the course of history, what arises is there is the use of violence in resolving disputes, oppression by the strong over the weak, increasingly severe social inequalities, and the life damage is increasingly worrying. That is, the followers of postmodernism understand that all this harmonies is a misunderstanding produce of modernization era. The great narratives of modernism, which originate from capitalism, essentialism, liberalism, idealism, has proven. Furthermore, postmodernism understands that it is not permissible to establish absolute truth. That truth is relative and adapted to local cultural wisdom. Postmodernism also considers that the social practice of a truth that is shared by the interests of certain groups is often considered to be a truth that must be recognized and followed by the other parties. Thus, coercion of other groups occurs by other groups acting in the name of the common group, the common good. Now, we continue in postmodernism. The etymology, postmodernism is divided into two words, right? Number one, post, and the last, modern. And the word post in Webster Dictionary Library is a form of prefix defined as later or after. Now, if we put it together to be one word, become postmodernism, it will mean as a connection to modernity itself by trying to answer questions that cannot be answered in modern era that are arises because of modernity itself. Okay? Now, where is in terminology according to the figures of from postmodernism? Pauline Rusnew defines postmodernism clearly in opposite terms, among others. First, postmodernism is critique of modern society and its failure to fulfill its promises. Also, postmodernism tends to criticize everything that is associated with modernity, namely, the accumulation of Western civilization experiences are industrialization, urbanization, technological progress, nation states live in the fast lane. But they adopt modern priorities such as career, position, personal, responsibility, bureaucracy, liberal democracy, tolerance, humanism, egalitarianism, object reserve, evaluation criteria, neutral procedure, impersonal rules and rationality. That's the first one. The second, postmodernism theorists tend to reject what is usually known as a worldview, meta-narrative, totality, and so on. Okay, in postmodernism, everything is relative. Truth is relative, reality is relative, and both are implication in how we see ourselves with each other. This clearly has implication in how we see ourselves and construct self-identity. This is in line with the definition of Friedrich William Nietzsche. He is known as the prophet of postmodernism. He is a pioneering voice against rationality, traditionality, morality, objectivity, and Christian thought in general. Nietzsche said there are many kinds of eyes. Even the Sphinx also has eyes. And therefore there are many kinds of truth. And therefore there is no absolute in truth. Okay. Now, at first the word postmodern did not appear in philosophy or sociology. This postmodern discourse first appeared in architecture and later also in literature. The word postmodern, architecture, and literature are more breathable critics of modern architecture and literature, which are seen as totalitarian, mechanical, and inhuman. But finally, this critic of modern architectural and literacy art becomes a critic of modern culture in general, known as the postmodern era. Postmodern seeds initially grow in architectural environments. So, Charles Jenks, with his book The Language of Postmodern Architecture in 1975, called modern post as an effort to find the architectural style pluralism after hundreds of supported one style. Postmodernism was born actually in St. Louis, Missouri, July on 1972. When it was first established, the Pruitt Ego House project in St. Louis is considered a symbol of modern architecture. More importantly, it stands as a picture of modernism, which uses technology to create a utopian society for human welfare. But the occupant intentionally destroyed the building. And the government devotes a lot of funds to renovate the building. But finally, after spending millions of dollars, the government gave up. On the afternoon on July 1972, the buildings was blown up with dynamite, strong dynamite. That according to Charles Jenks, who is considered the most influential postmodern architect, this explosion even marked the death of the modernism and also marked the birth of postmodernism. But now finally, this postmodern thought began to influence various fields of life including in the fields of philosophy, science, and sociology. Postmodern eventually became a cultural critic of modernity. What the modern mind is proud of is now condemned. And what was looked upon is now valued. Initially, the word postmodern did not appear in philosophy or sociology. These postmodern discourses first appear in architecture and, yeah, as I mentioned later on, in literature. So, this one uh, become, correction to modernity. Yeah. Now, what is again something happened that the postmodernists also uh, having problem because the postmodernism has a critics. What is the criticism of postmodernism? One of the authors named David Carr in his book Introduction in Education, Knowledge and Truth, Beyond Postmodern Impasse writes that postmodernism figures want to reject the possibility of object knowledge, but seem to regard it as objective facts about the world, that subject knowledge about the world is always interpreted. And therefore, such knowledge is never objective. Now, what is the postmodernism and the education relation? One of the writer named Andy Green wrote in his book Postmodernism and State Education. In Education, Globalization, and the Nation State, he wrote that there is clearly no such things yet as a postmodern theory of education. Green was obviously skeptical about whether there ever could be such a thing. Postmodernism has a little of value to offer educational theory, but it has many dangers. The word's education is, on any conceivable account, some activity or process intended to move the development and learning of people in a desired direction. A direction that, if many analytical philosophers of education are correct, intrinsically contains within the idea of human betterment. Certainly, a postmodern perspective can provide, and has provided, a critical angle on such effort. What does betterment mean? Some question occurs follows, within whose cultural norms and interests? For which students? Who decides what knowledge, what value, and disposition, even or character, are worth acquiring? How are the activities of teaching structured or distorted by elements of unequal power? What happens when educational practices get embedded in the bureaucratic, state-governed, and disciplinary structures we call schools, right? It appears that education is, in Foucault's terminology, intrinsically normalizing, at least to a degree, and it seems impossible to imagine any system of education that will not be subject to that criticism. But then a deeper question arises In what ways is a normalizing education necessarily bad? Isn't normalizing in part just what we expect from education, in the sense of socializing learners into participation within a given social formation? Again, we are in ambivalent space. But when we turn to what might be a more prescriptive alternative account, postmodernism seems to founder on its own autocritique. On what basis could such prescriptive alternative conception rest? Maybe we can ask what generalizability could they have? Okay, how could they possibly flourish within the institutional structures and constraints of schools as they currently exist? As Rousseau discovered in the Emile, even at a time, a completely natural and unfettered education for freedom inevitably brings an element of social constraint. Nevertheless, many thoughtful scholars have tried to provide just as a positive, postmodern account of education. One of them is Stanley Aronovitz. For example, he wrote, following from the dialectical relationship of knowledge and practice, postmodern educators believe the curriculum can best inspire learning only when school knowledge builds upon the tacit knowledge derived from the cultural resources that students already possess. Perhaps more controversial is the fostering by postmodernists of the claims to intellectual validity of marginal discourses in the sciences and social sciences, especially those that refuse or philosophical or ideological grounds to observe. Now, we turn to what is the statement of Seventh-day Adventist educational philosophy before we will connect it to postmodernism issue. Seventh-day Adventists, within the context of our basic beliefs, acknowledge that one, God is the creator and sustainer of the entire universe, animate and inanimate. He created perfect human beings in his own image with power to think, to choose, and to do. God is the source of all that is true, good, beautiful, and has chosen to reveal himself to humankind. Human, by their own choice, rebelled against God and fell into a state of sin that has affected the entire planet, plunging it into the cosmic conflict between good and evil. In spite of this, the Word and human beings still reveal, however dimly, the goodness and beauty of their original condition. The Godhead met the problem of sin through the plan of redemption. This plan aims to restore human beings to God's image and the universe back to its original state of perfection, love, and harmony. God invites us to choose His plan of restoration and to relate to this world creatively and responsibly until he intervenes in his story to bring about the new heaven and the new earth. This is the philosophy of Seven Days Adventist education. The Seven Day Adventist philosophy of education is Christ centered. Short but clear. Again, I repeat, the Seventh-day Adventist philosophy of education is, underline, Christ-centered. Adventists believe that under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, God's character and purposes can be understood as revealed in nature, in the Bible, and in Jesus Christ. The distinctive characteristic of Adventist education derive from the Bible, and the writing of Ellen G. White points to the redemption aim of true education, to restore human beings into the image of their Maker. And Seventh-day Adventists believe that God is infinitely loving, wise, and powerful. He relates to human beings on a personal level, presenting his character as the ultimate norm for human conduct and his grace as the means of restoration. Adventists recognize, however, that human motives, human thinking, and behavior have fallen short of God's ideal. Education, in its broadest sense, is means of restoring human beings to their original relationship with God. Working together, homes, school, church, cooperate with divine agency in preparing learners for responsible citizenship in this world and in the world to come. Adventist education imparts more than academic knowledge. It fosters a balanced development of the whole person spiritually, intellectually, physically, and socially. Its two dimensions span eternity. It seeks to develop a life of faith in God and respect for dignity of all human beings. To build character akin to that of the Creator, to nurture thinkers rather than mere reflectors for other thoughts, to promote loving service rather than selfish ambitions, to ensure maximum development of each individual's potential, and to embrace all is true, good, and beautiful. Okay, now we continue to our conclusion. Baumgartner, in his book In the Professional School of Psychology, wrote, one of the criticism of postmodernism direct at modernism is its reliance on the development and maintenance of hierarchies. For example, the presidents are higher than the deans, and the deans higher than the chairs. Chairs higher than instructing faculty. Instructor faculty higher than student. This is the manner of things in higher organization. And for that matter, in most modern organizations, hierarchies also exist in the relationship of higher education disciplines to each other. Sample, science being higher than arts, arts being higher than professions. Another one, the credential, doctoral degree over master degree, over baccalaureate degree, over associate degree, and the institution, university over university, college over community college. Now, these hierarchies set up definitions about whom or what qualifies as being in or out or as top or bottom. The minority student or minority institution is certainly not at the top of the list. So making space in a hierarchy is making room for someone to be superior and someone to be inferior. Hierarchy institutions are valuable if we believe that what the hierarchy perpetuates is more important to the well-being of society than what individuals might want. We might not have the ability to recognize that is important to the well-being of the greater society. This argument goes, but the hierarchy keeps the society needs in balance. Hierarchy might not be such a good thing if those who lead us are unaware of the interweaving of hierarchy, power, and knowledge. Who is allowed to ask questions? Who is allowed to generate and disseminate knowledge? Knowledge creation is political. Who in the higher education presently asks the question that promote the generation to new knowledge? It is not students. It is the professor and the granting bodies who are interested in the creation and question. Who has defined that we study discipline as they are presently arranged? Who has educated learning with granting of the credit? Now, according to the postmodernists, higher education organization must find an alternate route from which to grow the postmodern organization. Furthermore, Lyotard identifies and criticizes our reliance on a modern meta-narrative and prompts us to examine this narrative. Although this narrative gives our lives direction and structure, it also traps us to a way of thinking. The postmodern meta-narrative keeps us in the performance-oriented mode. Important learning, like Stan Lester said, is not extrinsic to the learner. It is intrinsic and develops capacity for a sustainable society and for individual needs. He mentioned in the kind of learning society is to develop which is adequate to the 21st century context. Learning will need to be accepted as natural and endemic rather than as something which occurs as a result or discrete learning, even all through following a curriculum. Lester also later on proposed two paradigms for learning. There's A and B model learning. He mentioned that model A learning is the modern industrial way of piecing together chunks of information about the world. And hopefully, the learner will be able to chain these chunks together for an understanding of the greater picture. In Model B learning is intended for the post-industrial era. It requires a meta-curriculum, which is concerned with this creative, critically activity of man making rather than with the content of any specific map. Whereas Model A learning is specific and technical. Model B learning is holistic and creative. Model A relies on the assumption that learners are citizens who will refer to existing standards to build on the existing knowledge base like primary engage in deductive and analytic reasoning. In Model B, on the other hand, sees learners as unique individuals who judge not by existing standard, but by the fitness for the purpose, using inductive and adductive reasoning. When we using Model L, learners are being trained to solve the problem using logic and proof. In Model B, we learn or the learners are being educated in understanding using how to fit problematic situation and in framing desired outcomes using values, ethics, systemic interrelationship, theory, and of course a faith claim that any curriculum has an underlying learning byproduct. The Model B meta-curriculum, Lester say, is the one who fit to the society. Now, what is the effect of postmodernism on way learners learn and instructors teach? Anyone who among you have suggestion? Now, let me give you a brief of describing about this one. Postmodern life is not predictable, right? We must live in the moment in order to be in tune with the ever-changing condition. We need meta strategies or ways of thinking about which strategy to employ. Better yet, we need ways of knowing how to create and tailor new strategies to respond to the learning needs in our various contexts. It is critical that we know how to live and learn in an open system, open to ambiguity, open also to serendipitous development. Postmodern society is inundated with information. Information has become abundant and free during the 21st century. Information is now fully accessible. We live in a democratized society of digital interactivity. Postmodern learners are required to know the difference between data, information, and knowledge. Students must develop information literacy skills and the awareness of their own selection bias. The postmodern instructor must be able to walk with their student through the data and information to the knowledge that is both involved with the purpose of the course of studies and with the meaning relative to the life of each individual student. Modern thinking uses the executive brain. The executive brain is logically and serves control function. Life is structured, ordered, hierarchical. There is a proper place and a proper function for everything. If it is not ordered or logical, let's figure out, they say. The executive brain controls communication and action, of course. Now, modern students rely on this kind of logic and on dogma. They rely on learning what they are told because it is in the best interest of the role they are to play. Modern educational theory attempts to classify and segment learning. The word is taken apart, split into the disciplines, objectified, quantitified, and then packaged as courses with learners' objectives. This model relies on the such of stage to parcel out the information to learners. Learners can utilize strategies to improve learning. A grade is assigned based on the degree to which the learner has achieved this teacher-determined objective. Postmodern life is not just about rapid and turbulent change. Can you underline it? Postmodern life is not just about rapid and turbulent change. It is also about fragmentation of old system and the expectation. There are constant disruptions. It is hard to count on any one set of values or any one paradigm. To deal with the fragmentation of the old paradigm, Postmodern students apply their own story and experience to the learning environment. They learn to trust not only their own rational process, it's housed primarily in their prefrontal cortex, right? But also their exceptionally gifted institution. This primarily in their much older, larger, more mature limbic brain. So the postmodern instructor engaged with a learner from an appreciative perspective encouraged this person to relate the direction of the course or the program to their personal experiences instead of viewing in the past baggage that should be left outside the educational experience. Instructor and tutor and student co-create new learning and understanding in the moment. Again, furthermore, postmodern learning is a creative act. It involves ever-changing environments and learning arrangement. Individual plans can be created wherein the learner is an active participant. The postmodern teacher and mature students are partners in learning a body of knowledge within a contemporary context. Other methods are not discarded, but they are used, modified, and recreated to suit the situation at hand. The postmodern instructor is a guide on the side whose role is more to facilitate learning experience towards the meaningful aims. Alternate views and content integration are encouraged. Ideas are brought together through the holistic approach to from new ways of knowing the world. New learning relationship and knowledge creation potential are heightened and become an exciting aspect of postmodern class. We are going now to close our conclusion. What is the implication of postmodern condition for education? What are the attitudes, process, and structures that instructors need to provide a postmodern education to adults? Now, there are several teaching and learning in the postmodern world addresses, such as number one, meta strategies are ways of thinking about which strategy to employ, ways of knowing how to create and tailor new strategies to respond to the learning needs in our various contexts. Number two, knowledge about ways in which to live and learn in open system in which there is considerable ambiguity and serendipitous development. Number three, information literacy skill for students and awareness by students of their own selection bias. The postmodern instructor leads their student through the data and information to the knowledge that is involved with the purpose of the course of studies and with the meaning relative to the life of each individual student. And the fourth, relationship between the course and the program direction and the individual personal experience. New learning and understanding is co-created in the moment. Number five, creation is of individual plans wherein the learner is an active participant. Creation of partnership between teachers and students in learning a body of knowledge within a contemporary context. Number six, creation of instructor role as a guide on the side, tutor, learning coach, and facilitator of learning experiences toward meaningful aims. Number seven, ideas are brought together through a holistic approach to form new ways of knowing the world. New learning, relationship, and knowledge creation potential are heightened and are an exciting aspect of the postmodern class. Number nine, meta strategies, or maybe we can call meta cognitive strategies, are required. Students learn how to learn. Number 10, learners are encouraged to find personal meaning from the learning as the teacher is allowed to discard the mask of authority and be more themselves, modeling the lifelong learning value of modernism, postmodernism. And the last one, learners living in a postmodern world are encouraged to formulate and engage a clear, stable, sustaining image of self. Now, at the end of this lecture, what relate of postmodernism philosophy to our faith? As you know, God made our world with the order and harmonization of life in all his creatures. However, Satan corrupts God's perfect creation with his philosophy of lying. Dissatisfaction based on wisdom from itself has brought chaos for the life of the earth. For example, certain philosophy we can call like modernization, okay? And God's laws, which according to Satan is difficult to obey. In response of this, God sent his son and act, we can say, postmodernism that would improve the modern philosophy previously that Satan has denied to humans before. So in a short term, modernism has a failures and postmodernism try to fix it. Modernism is like using individualizing potential without no relation how to make environment better. They just become a capitalism. They become just individualism. No cares for the neighboring. And then, like the sinners, we are being ego ourselves. And we lack of the love, shares, and helping others with their weak. So when Jesus comes, the postmodernism era comes. Is now our era. We are learning about the more important thing that whenever we have things added in our life, success, or any of the benefit that we approach in our life, we have to acknowledge that all these things should be become a blessing to others. We have to live in postmodernism, where Jesus Christ has taught, has teach us, and then we will follow the step of his pathway. So the summary of this all, students, we learn about postmodernism and the philosophy. Yes, it is secularly, but being understand about postmodernism, the philosophy, educational and the challenge, we can conclude that the postmodernism philosophy is to elevate our aims of education to the world that Seventh-day Adventist philosophy, our own belief, our postmodernism, is to preparing us for a post-millennial life and leave this world to a new Jerusalem city. Thank you again for watching. May your lectures here will elevate your knowledge and also you are now become more better understanding about the postmodernism era. You will can learn better, not just using your logical, but also you using your sympathize, your empathy to the others. Why you have to learn something, and it will be a blessing for others. May God bless you all. Thank you again.